1986 was a difficult one to be patient for Penguins fans because all of a sudden the future was bright for this team. Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, even though he was still playing in Russia. Yeah, I was with you. I was preaching patience with Sergei Gonchar, but I was also preaching patience with Ziggy Palffy. And then Palffy quit and went back overseas, and all of a sudden you just kind of felt like, here we go again. Rough times for Pittsburgh. One guy who has had no trouble kind of coming into a new system now as a defenseman, he's thriving in every sense of the word, is Chris Letang. And what is the difference? Like, why did he not gel with what Dan Bousman was trying to do as compared to what we see now with Mike Johnston, where Chris Letang just looks like a completely different hockey player?
I think part of it is maybe under the old system, Chris felt more of a responsibility to generate the attack. And whereas under Mike Johnston, he has more puck support coming up the ice, he probably feels more comfortable dropping the puck off to someone else to do the heavy lifting when it comes to gaining entry into the offensive zone. And one thing I am seeing from this new system, and one thing that does really stand out from the screen, and I'm no certainly coaching expert or anything like that, but I do notice that the defensemen are joining the play a little bit later than they used to. I think they were asked to do a lot under the old system, and were asked to, in a lot of cases, in the case of Chris Letang, to almost do most of the work coming up to the neutral zone. But right now they're getting rid of the puck. They're skating up ice, and like we saw in that game-winning goal in Boston the other night, Letang going to the net and really creating havoc, because all of a sudden, oh look, there's a defenseman coming up and we got to cover him, and oh no, we just let Malkin score a one-timer from the right circle. So it's almost a self-attack for the Penguins defenseman, and Letang has been part of that. Simone Dupre has been part of that. They haven't had guys obviously like Rob Scuderi doing that too much, but at the same time, it has been another option for the Penguins offense to hit that late man, and the late man in a lot of cases is the defenseman, and the defensemen are given the freedom to do that, and so far the forwards have been able to get back and cover up. It's pretty much hockey 101, but we didn't see that as much under Dan Bylsma as we do now under Mike Johnston. So that's something that maybe Chris Letang excels at, as that late trailer. He's able to read the play and plug that hole, so to speak, on the ice, on the rush especially. He has been a lot of fun to watch.
I think the easy way, or the kind of the layman terms way of watching a hockey game and comparing the two systems is to watch a game with the current Pittsburgh Penguins and at 5-on-5 even strength, looking at how many black jerseys you see in the frame at any given time, and you tell me if you ever see 3 or less in that screen versus Dan Bylsma, in particular in the breakout, because you see all 3 forwards exit the zone and go up ice for the stretch pass, and it's not happening anymore this season, or all that often. It's still somewhat of a part of the scheme, but it's not the definition of what the Penguins are trying to do. There's, like you said, there's a lot more puck support. If Chris Letang makes a mistake, it's not automatically catastrophic. And that's what it was with him. It's what it was with Simone, Simon, whatever, Dupre.
I guess it's Simon now.
Well, it's, I don't know. Paul Staggerwald is beating that to death. That the fact that it's going to be Simon Dupre, and Bob Arie is following the company line in the suit there. Mike Lang refuses to call him Simon. He's still Simone in his book. So I don't want to say. Oh, and you know what? Actually, we had him on the show back when he was in junior, actually, and he called himself Simone Dupre. So I'm still kind of on the Simone Dupre bandwagon there. So I don't know.
Well, I feel like he shouldn't sell out. It's the French sounding name, so go with it. You know,
it is. It may really just be a part of his rebranding package. Like Simone Dupre Incorporated realized that they had a crisis during the offseason and they needed to change things. So Simon came along, and that's his new brand. Who knows, though, the way hockey players' minds work. But yeah, there's a whole lot more security for all the defensemen, not just Chris Letang, but Dupre, but everybody. Robert Bortuzzo has been a disaster over the last few games that we've seen him play. But how many times have we really seen those disasters turn into goals against for the Penguins? There have been a few, but it hasn't been given up 4 or 5 or 6 a night like we necessarily saw in the past few seasons. So I think that for defensemen, this is a much easier system to play and a much more forgiving system to play.
Yeah, I would agree all over the ice. For every position, it's more forgiving just because you have, like you said, more black jerseys, more, I guess, white jerseys if you're watching on the road. But you get the point. It's a case where you have more options, and I do like that. And there always will be a spot for the stretch pass with the red lines out, so you might as well use the length of the ice. And the Chicago Blackhawks use the stretch pass as well as anyone in hockey. So, I tend to cringe, Ken, when people say, oh, we don't want to use the stretch pass anymore because that was Dan Bilesman's thing. Well, it does work from time to time. It just doesn't work all the time. That's really the case there. And I don't want to throw everything out that Dan Bilesman did that was working. So I always hesitate whenever I hear someone try to pile on to the old regime. They did a lot of great things. It just didn't quite come together in some of the more important spots, and that's what the new coaching staff, that's what the new GM is supposed to try to fix. But, you can say there was room for change while at the same time also admitting that a lot of good things happened under the old regime.
No, and those who follow us know that I was always I don't want to say apologist for Dan Bylsma, but I'm a Dan Bylsma fan. I think he is a good hockey coach, but every coach has their faults. And Dan being a young coach, I really believe that his major fault was the fact that maybe he was a little bit stubborn. And whereas Mike Johnston, he's a lifer, and he's not threatened by new ideas that go against what he's necessarily preaching at that moment. You can kind of give it a little bit more looks and be a little bit more diverse with that sort of stuff. So I think that that's a strength he has over Dan Bylsma that might make him a very successful coach here in Pittsburgh.
I've liked what I've seen so far. I like that he gives the media a little bit more. I think at times Dan felt like the media was not the enemy, but someone to be avoided. And
did he start that way, though?
To be dealt with? Yeah, you could be right there, Ken, actually, because it felt like, compared to Michel Therrien, my goodness, he was definitely more.
Yes.
Yeah, he was definitely more of an open guy, although Michel knew how to work the media to his benefit, like in the case of the speech early in his tenure after the loss to the Oilers, the soft speech, as we all know it. So that was definitely a case where he manipulated the media to get what he wanted, but I don't think he was very friendly with them, and I don't think he is to this day in Montreal. And yeah, you're right. Maybe it was just a case of some scarring building up for Bylsma. Maybe he felt like he was burned by revealing too much. But you're right about Mike Johnston. He doesn't seem to be rattled by much of anything, whether it be during the game or in the post-game media scrum. I like that he talks about certain things that didn't work and what they might try. The media can be your friend if you use them the right way and if you respect what they have to do and not always try to be coy with them. And Mike Johnston, certainly at least early on in his tenure, has not been that. He has been very honest, and I felt like I've learned a lot from the guys so far.
That is, the older coaches really, really get that. And I don't know if it's because they're more experienced with it or if they just have a different mindset when approaching the media because they grew up with a different type of media. But with the recent passing of Pat Quinn, there have been, stories upon stories about him as a coach and him and his dealing with the media and the way that he used them and manipulated them. And all of those coaches have similar stories like that, the way they were able to protect their players by deflecting or any of that kind of stuff. and Pat Quinn was a master of it. You don't necessarily get that vibe from Dan Bylsma or many of the coaches in the National Hockey League right now. Some are more media savvy than others, but I don't know how many of them really use the media or play with the media kind of for the benefit of what's going on in their own room. That might be a sign of that the media has changed the way that they do things, and they certainly have. And it might just be a sign that we have some coaches who don't have experience in that area. Mike Johnson does have experience, whether it be at the NHL level or junior or whatever. But I have been very interested in that aspect of Dan Bylsma's career path because, like you said, at the end of it, he absolutely thought the media or felt like the media was almost the enemy. It's just such a different tone than when he took over and he was a media darling. And it wasn't just because of the contrast between him and Terry, and he loved it. He really did. He loved being in front of the cameras, giving interviews. He was joking and smiling. That all went away at some point, and I don't know what it was. But it was also when you started to see the term joyless used around the Pittsburgh Penguins a lot. To steal that one from Dejan Kovacevic, but it was absolutely true where there was just no fun around this hockey team anymore.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting case study there to look back, and maybe some more years between the end of that tenure and where we are right now will help us understand all that went on there. But I do think part of it is as well, you had a guy like Rob Rossi with the Tribune Review. He was definitely a news hound. He was definitely going after the story hard, and with all the stuff that went on with Sidney Crosby, and the team didn't want to reveal too much regarding his concussion, maybe that could be a turning point too, because you had someone in the media like Rossi, more of, I guess you would say, more of an East Coast type media voice who was very tenacious. Some media atmospheres are a lot more, I don't want to say friendly, because you can always be friendly outside of your professional obligations, but they aren't quite as investigative, I guess I would say. And the way the Trib had it set up with Josh Hill able to write more about the hockey on the ice and Rossi able to chase the stories off the ice, maybe it felt to the Penguins like they needed to be more secretive, especially when it came to injuries and especially when it came to Sidney Crosby. So that could have been where the turning point was. You talk about Pat Quinn dealing with media up in Toronto. They've always been ravenous. It's been the same way for 20, 30 years. Not like much has changed up there. New York, similar situation. A guy like Larry Brooks with the Post is always going to be there ready for the needle. And John Tortorella famously liked to go back and forth with him. So it comes down to media personalities too, as well as coaches, and how all that, I guess, intermingles and plays together over the course of a season and many seasons.
And you take us directly into tonight's opponent, and that is the Toronto Maple Leafs. Jonathan Bernier in net tonight. Toronto is 11-8-2 in the season, coming off a 4-1 win over the Detroit Red Wings. They're 5-4-1 in the last 10, and the natives are quite restless. Plenty of talk about Randy Carlyle being on the hot seat, and the name that is thrown out there for all Torontonians is Dan Bylsma, which is hilarious to me because when Dan Bylsma was being criticized outside of Pittsburgh, it always seemed to go back to Toronto. Like Toronto was the one pointing at Pittsburgh and saying, like, what's that guy doing? He doesn't know what he's doing. And all of a sudden, he is kind of the hot name that's being tossed around up there, whether it means that he's an actual legitimate candidate for that job. I'm talking about Carlisle like he's already been fired, but let's be honest, it's going to happen sometime in the next couple of months. But if Bylsma had trouble with the media here, I hope he's learned some lessons over the last few months. And if he's going to be dealing with it in Toronto. But let's talk about Toronto right now as a hockey team coming in here to Pittsburgh. We got jerseys being thrown on the ice. When the team wins, they don't salute the crowd, and everyone's pissed off at them then too. So is there anything that makes people in Toronto happy? It might be a Stanley Cup, but we don't know what that looks like